The rutted track emerges from a wooden hillside, and you catch your first glimpse of Phandalin. The town consists of 40 or 50 simple log buildings, some built on old fieldstone foundations. More old ruins, crumbling stone walls covered in ivy and briars, surround the newer houses and shops, showing how this must have been a much larger town in centuries past. Most of the newer buildings are set on the sides of the cart track, which widens into a muddy main street of sorts as it climbs towards a ruined manor house on a hillside at the east side of town. Hi everyone, I'm Thane Gibson, and we're talking about towns and villages on today's DMing the World. So that introduction is included in The Lost Mine of Phandelver. That is the adventure that was included in the first 5th edition basic set. It was recently expanded in Phandelver and Below, the Shattered Obelisk. That probably is the first description of a D&D town that many of you heard. It's a great introduction into the aesthetic of D&D, a rundown, vaguely European village built on the bones of its past. Digging into the 50 years of D&D lore, you'll find that a lot of the starting towns sound very similar to this. But were medieval towns actually like that? Well, yes and no. Are there more interesting or even just more diverse examples of towns throughout the Middle Ages? Absolutely. We're going to talk about some of those and how they might fit into your RPG world. And make sure you stick around to the DMing the World toolbox, where I'm going to give you some writing prompts that will help you get started on building more interesting towns and villages for your campaign setting. To get started, let's establish our terminology. Today, in American English, we use the terms town and village fairly interchangeably. But from a historical perspective, they were very different. Phandalin is not a town, it's a village. With 40 or 50 buildings with an average of 4 people per building, that puts the population somewhere around 200. In medieval England, a town averaged between 1 and 3,000 inhabitants and a much higher population density than Phandalin. Villagers grew what they needed on the Lord's land, and then they gave a portion of what they grew back to the landowner. Villages would then trade with each other for the things that they need, and eventually the local lord or church would establish a market, especially if it was on a very popular route. As the market became established, other businesses would grow to support it. Villagers would then move to the town to work in those businesses, and eventually the town would become a travel destination. This is a classic example of what's called a market town. Settlements in Dungeons & Dragons and other fantasy RPGs trend towards this subsistence village or market town model. The village is that little out-of-the-way place that needs saving from the bandits, and the town is where the players go to restock supplies and sell their loot. It's going to need a market, and therefore it's going to need other businesses to support it, like inns and taverns and smithies. One interesting note about many fantasy RPG towns is that because they're mapped out on a flat piece of paper, they tend to have a fairly level terrain. Maybe there's a river that flows through it or a nearby forest that's encroaching on the settlement, but there's usually very little elevation change. However, that is simply not the case when we look at medieval era towns and villages throughout the world. They vary greatly in design depending on the terrain or their function. Hill towns are one example of how the terrain can change the character of a settlement. The term hill town can be used to describe any settlement that's built a higher elevation for fortification purposes. In European countries like Italy, Spain, and France, the term specifically describes a citadel protected by walls on a hilltop or cliffside. In Italy specifically, hill towns rose out of the fall of the Roman Empire as a means of protecting themselves from invading Visigoths. 3 examples of Italian hill towns include San Marino, Civita da Bagnoregio, and Orvieto. Many Italian hill towns grew to become their own independent city-states, like San Marino. In San Marino's case, it's still independent, making it the 3rd smallest country in Europe. The city of San Marino is built atop Monte Titano, and the country encompasses the mountain and the lands around it. Founded in the year 301, it became a refuge for Christians fleeing persecution by the Romans. Eventually, 3 impregnable towers were built to defend the city, allowing San Marino's famous crossbow corps and the Guards of the Rock to keep the city independent through the Crusades and all the way into the modern era. Civita di Bagnoregio perches on a plateau, slowly succumbing to erosion caused by the winds that blow through the rocky valley around it. Civita was founded by the Etruscans, the pre-Roman Iron Age people of Italy, over 2,500 years ago. The city has been added to and improved on by every major civilization since. Many of the exterior buildings have long since fallen down as the sides of the plateau crumbled beneath them. Even the ridge that used to provide access to the city has disappeared, and Civita is now only accessible by footbridge. Orvieto is another Etruscan hill town that has been built on by successive civilizations. After the Roman Empire, Orvieto became the location of one of the papal residences, homes throughout the papal territory that allowed the Pope to tour like a king or seek refuge from would-be usurpers. Orvieto is also known for the labyrinth of tunnels and vaults built into the volcanic rock it sits on. These tunnels served many functions, including cellars, cisterns, and even escape routes for the noble families during a siege. Besides Europe, hill settlements can be found in South America, North America, Africa, and Asia as well. Post towns are an example of how the function of a town can change its character. The term post town refers to any settlement along a route where posting takes place. Posting is the practice of providing fresh horses for a rider, usually a messenger, that would allow them to continue at a rapid pace. The stations at which posting would occur were literal posts where the horses were hitched. These would be used to hang public notices as well. The name eventually moved from the messenger to the practice of delivering the messages itself. It's where we get the term post, meaning mail, that we still use today. Post towns were common throughout Europe for many centuries. It allowed for travel over greater distances. Similarly, towns and caravanserai along the Silk Road would allow for travelers to stop and rest on their long journey of transporting goods from far away. This led to the sharing of cultures and information amongst the people who stopped for an evening's rest. In the Edo period of Japan, post towns known as shakuba sprang up for a slightly different purpose. They not only served as rest stops for messengers, but they provided lodging and regional offices for government officials. This allowed the government officials to move about the land with ease. Naturally, over time, other facilities were added to the shakuba to accommodate other types of travelers along the road. These are just 2 examples of the wide variety of towns and villages that are found in our actual world. And all of these can be used for inspiration in your own RPG setting. Both the hill town and the post town make excellent starting points and home bases for your player characters. I've discovered in my own career as a dungeon master that using something fresh, even if it's borrowed from the real world, makes your world come alive. If a location is unique and novel, then that is going to make it more believable. And it doesn't have to be something fantastical. It can just be a little change to something like a town. But if it stands apart from the default town, then it's going to make your story unique, and it's going to entice your players to engage and interact. So the next time that you're stumped for a memorable starting point to your adventure, don't pull out that one-dimensional quasi-medieval village again. Instead, look to the world around you and find something that strikes you as unique and start your world-building journey from there. Now, before we go on, if you're enjoying this and you like the ideas we're talking about here, make sure to like the video and subscribe to DMing the World to let me know that you like these types of discussions and want to see more of them. Also, click that notification icon just so you never miss an episode. All right, on to the DMing the World toolbox. Here are 5 writing prompts to get you started making more interesting villages and towns. Number 1, what are the unique features of the town? Is it on a hill or a mountain pass? Is it hard to reach or easy to defend? What is their source of water? What are the buildings made of and why? Number 2, who are the local powers? Is it a government official who acts solely on behalf of the king or the lord? Is it a council of prominent families? If so, why are they prominent? Is it the local church or temple? Is it the corrupt nobility who are preying on the travelers with their taxes and tithes? Number 3, what are the businesses in town? Are there inns and restaurants? What are their specialties that draw travelers to the town? What sorts of shops are in the town? Is there a church or a shrine? What higher power is it dedicated to, and who maintains it? Are there any unique businesses? A clockmaker, an artist's workshop, a bathhouse? Number 4, who are the notable people in town? What are their names? What are their motivations? Who are the ruling class? Who are the tradesfolk and merchants? Who are the common folk? Who are the martial forces? And number 5, what are the secrets about the town? Is there a labyrinth of dungeons carved into the rock that the town sits on? Is there a shrine that is believed to appease a local spirit or demon in the area? Are there criminal elements that walk the street after dark? I promise that if you take the time to answer all of these questions, your town will feel more believable, and it may actually become its own character in your world. If you get stumped on any of these, just look to the world around you. That's it for Towns and Villages. Come back for the next episode when we leave the safety of civilization and head out into the wilderness. Until then, keep DMing the world.